A waitress was fired for helping the Mafia boss, but the next day, she shocked everyone when she returned as the new owner. Before we dive in, let's light up this comment section with hearts from every corner of the world. The rain hammered against the tall windows of Vincenzo's, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, where reservations required both money and connections that most people would never possess. Emma Clark wiped down the marble bar for the third time that evening, her red apron crisp against her simple black shirt, her light brown hair pulled back in an elegant ponytail that her manager insisted upon. At 24, she'd been working here for 2 years, serving the wealthy elite who barely glanced at her face, seeing only the uniform, only the service, never the person beneath. The atmosphere shifted suddenly like air pressure, dropping before a storm. Emma felt it before she saw anything. The way conversations died mid-sentence, the way glasses paused halfway to lips, the way even the kitchen sounds seemed to fade into anxious silence. She looked up from polishing a wine glass to see the entrance, and her breath caught despite herself. He walked in like he owned not just the room, but the entire city block, maybe the whole city itself. Tall, imposing, dressed in a perfectly tailored black blazer over a white shirt, unbuttoned just enough to reveal a gold chain that caught the ambient light. His dark hair was slicked back with precision, his stubble beard trimmed to perfection, and when his dark eyes swept the room, grown men in expensive suits suddenly found their plates fascinating. Emma noticed the subtle tattoo on his neck, the heavy gold ring on his finger, the way his 2 companions, clearly bodyguards. Despite their suits flanked him with hands that never strayed far from their jackets. Table 12. Her manager Marco hissed, appearing beside her with sweat beating on his forehead, despite the restaurant's perfect climate control. The corner booth VIP service, Emma. And for God's sake, don't stare. Don't ask questions. Just smile and bring whatever he wants. Who is he? Emma whispered, unable to tear her eyes away, as the man settled into the secluded corner booth, his presence somehow filling the entire space, despite occupying such a small portion of it. Marco's face went pale. You don't know that's Dante Moretti. He runs everything that matters in this city. Everything the police don't control and half of what they do. Just do your job and pray he doesn't notice you. But Dante Moretti did notice her. The moment Emma approached his table with her notepad and her practiced professional smile, his dark eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously seen and dissected. Unlike every other patron she'd ever served, he actually looked at her. Not through her, not past her, but directly into her, as if reading pages of a book written in her expression. Good evening, sir. What can I bring you tonight? Her voice came out steadier than she felt, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Interest. Definitely. You're new, he said, his voice deep and smooth, like expensive whiskey with an edge that suggested violence was never more than a word away. I've worked here 2 years, actually. Emma met his gaze, something in her refusing to look away, despite every instinct screaming that this man was dangerous in ways she couldn't begin to comprehend. The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been amusement. New to me, then, I would have remembered you. He paused, his eyes traveling over her face, with an appreciation that felt different from the leerous stares she sometimes endured. This felt like he was memorizing her cataloging details for reasons she couldn't fathom. What's your name? Emma, sir. Emma. He said it like he was tasting the word, testing how it felt in his mouth. Bring me the Macallan 25. neat, and Emma. She paused halfway through turning away. You don't need to call me sir. Dante will do. The next hour passed in a strange fog. Emma brought his drink, aware of his eyes following her movements every time she passed near his booth. She served other tables, but she could feel his attention like heat against her skin, constant and unwavering. Her co-workers whispered frantically in the kitchen about why Dante Moretti was alone tonight, instead of with his usual entourage. Why he kept watching the waitress, whether this meant something terrible or something stranger. Then Marcus Bellamy walked in. Marcus was old money, a real estate developer who owned half the buildings downtown and had the ego to match his bank account. He was also drunk loud and had never learned that money couldn't buy respect from people who didn't need his wealth. Emma had served him before, had endured his wandering hands and crude comments because jobs like this were hard to find and harder to keep. Well, well, Marcus announced to the suddenly silent restaurant, his words slurring slightly as he spotted Dante's booth. If it isn't the city's favorite thug sitting in the open like he's a real person. Tell me, Moretti, do they let you eat with actual silverware, or do you prefer to tear your meat with your bare hands like the animal everyone knows you are? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Emma watched Dante's expression remain completely neutral. But his bodyguards shifted almost imperceptibly, and she saw something deadly flash through those dark eyes, before being shuddered away behind cool indifference. Go home, Bellamy, Dante said quietly, his voice carrying despite its low volume. You're drunk and you're embarrassing yourself. Embarrassing myself? Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that made Emma waz. That's rich coming from a murderer in a nice suit. Your father was scum. You're scum. And everyone here knows it, even if they're too afraid to say it. Emma saw Dante's hand tighten almost imperceptibly around his glass. Saw the muscle jump in his jaw. But he didn't move, didn't rise to the bait. And something about his restraint in the face of such public humiliation struck her as deeply wrong. This was a man who could end Marcus with a phone call. Everyone in the room knew it. Yet he sat there absorbing insults because responding would only confirm what Marcus was saying. Before she could think better of it, before rational thought could stop her, Emma stepped directly between Marcus and Dante's booth, her red apron bright in the dim lighting, her chin lifted in defiance that surprised even herself. Sir, you need to leave. Her voice rang clear in the silent restaurant. You're intoxicated. You're disturbing other guests, and you're being disrespectful. I'm going to have to ask you to go. Marcus's face purpled with rage. You little, who the hell do you think you are? Some waitress telling me what to do. Do you know how much money I spend here? I know you're banned as of right now. Marco appeared finally finding his spine, though Emma could see his hands shaking. Security will escort you out, Mr. Bellamy. As security moved Marcus toward the exit, he turned back to spit one last comment. You're fired, you stupid girl. I'm a major investor in this restaurant, and you just cost yourself your job defending a killer. The door closed behind him, and the restaurant slowly returned to life. Conversations resuming in hushed tones, Emma stood frozen, the reality of what she'd done crashing over her like ice water. She'd just lost her job, her income, her ability to pay rent, all because she'd defended a man she didn't even know, a man whose reputation suggested he was everything Marcus had said, and worse. Emma. Dante's voice pulled her from her spiraling thoughts. She turned to face him, expecting what gratitude, amusement. Instead, she found something far more complex in his expression, confusion mixed with what looked almost like concern. "Come here." She approached his table on shaking legs, her professional mask cracking as the adrenaline faded and left her feeling hollow. "I'm sorry if I made things worse for you, Mr. Moretti." "Dante," he corrected absently, studying her with those penetrating dark eyes. "And you didn't make anything worse for me, but you just destroyed your own life for someone you don't know." Why Emma considered the question considered lying, but something about his direct gaze demanded honesty. Because what he said was cruel, and you were showing him more respect than he deserved by not responding. Someone needed to defend common decency. Even if she gestured vaguely at herself, at her uniform, at her obvious powerlessness, even if it cost something. For a long moment, Dante said nothing. Just looked at her, as if she were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve, an equation that didn't balance according to the mathematics of his world. Then he reached into his jacket. His bodyguards tensed and pulled out a business card, expensive card stock with nothing but a phone number embossed in gold. "You're going to need a new job," he said, simply, sliding the card across the table. "Call this number tomorrow afternoon. Tell them Dante sent you." Emma stared at the card like it might bite her. I can't accept charity, Mr. Moretti." "Dante." And it's not charity. Something almost like a smile touched his lips. "Consider it a job offer from someone who appreciates courage when he sees it. The question is, Emma, do you have the courage to call?" Before she could answer, Marco appeared with her final paycheck and a box for her locker belongings, his face apologetic but firm. As Emma walked out of Vincenzo's for the last time, she felt Dante Moretti's eyes on her back, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't begin to predict. The card in her pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric, a promise and a threat all at once, a gateway to a world she'd been raised to fear but couldn't deny she was curious about. She had no idea that by tomorrow, everything she thought she knew about power protection and the dangerous man in the corner booth would be shattered completely. Emma didn't sleep that night. She sat in her tiny studio apartment, the business card on her coffee table, like a bomb waiting to detonate, and researched Dante Moretti until dawn painted her windows grey. What she found made her blood run cold. The official records were scarce. A few mentions in society pages, some business registrations under holding companies that led to other holding companies in an endless maze of legal protection. But the unofficial records, the whispered stories on forums and true crime blogs, painted a picture of a man who controlled the city's underground with absolute authority. The Moretti family had ruled organized crime for 3 generations, and Dante had inherited the throne at 25 when his father was killed in a power struggle that left 12 people dead and 20 families displaced. In the 8 years since he'd consolidated power so completely that even the other crime families paid him tribute. People who crossed Dante Moretti didn't go to jail. They simply disappeared, vanished into the night, and no one ever asked what happened, because everyone already knew. He ran everything from the docks to the diamond district, from illegal gambling to legitimate construction. And the line between legal and illegal in his empire was so blurred that even the FBI couldn't find where one ended and the other began. He'd never been arrested, never even questioned, because witnesses developed amnesia and evidence disappeared before it reached the courtroom. And Emma had defended him, defended a man whose hands were metaphorically soaked in blood, whose reputation was built on fear and violence, whose very name made grown men cross the street to avoid passing too close. She'd lost her job for a crime lord, and now that crime lord had offered her what a position in his organization, a debt she'd spend years repaying a target on her back from everyone who wanted to hurt him. By the time her phone alarm chimed at noon, Emma had decided. She would call the number, but only to politely decline. She didn't belong in that world, didn't want any part of the darkness that surrounded Dante Moretti. No matter how compelling his eyes had been, or how her heart had raced when he'd looked at her, like she mattered. The phone rang twice before a crisp female voice answered. "Moretti Enterprises, how may I direct your call? My name is Emma Clark. Dante asked me to call this number." Even saying his first name felt presumptuous intimate in a way that made her uncomfortable. "One moment, Ms. Clark." The hold music was classical, expensive sounding. Emma paced her small apartment, rehearsing her polite refusal, reminding herself that she didn't need this kind of complication in her life. Then the music cut off, and a different voice came on the line. Deep, smooth, unmistakably his. "Emma, I wasn't sure you'd call." Her rehearsed speech evaporated. "Mr. Moretti Dante." Dante. She conceded his name, feeling dangerous in her mouth. "I wanted to thank you for your offer, but I can't accept. I appreciate the gesture, but I don't think I'm suited for whatever it is you're offering." Silence on the other end, long enough that she wondered if the call had dropped. "Then do you know where Vincenzo's is located?" "Emma." The question confused her. "Of course I worked there for 2 years." "Do you know who owns it? The Castellano family. They've owned it for decades. It's a—" She stopped, something cold sliding down her spine. "Why are you asking me this?" "Because as of 9:00 this morning, I own Vincenzo's. I bought it along with the entire building it occupies and the 2 adjacent properties, and I'd like you to meet me there at 3 this afternoon to discuss your new position." Emma's legs gave out, and she sat down hard on her threadbare couch. "You bought an entire restaurant because I got fired. I bought a profitable business that was being mismanaged by investors who valued money over loyalty." His voice was matter-of-fact, as if purchasing buildings was as casual as buying coffee. The fact that one of those investors insulted both of us and cost you your job simply made the decision easier. 3:00. "Emma, don't be late." He hung up before she could protest, leaving her staring at her phone in disbelief. Dante Moretti had bought Vincenzo's. The whole thing overnight because of her. Emma arrived at the restaurant at 2:55 p.m. Her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The place looked the same from outside, but when she pushed through the doors, everything was different. The entire staff stood in the main dining room, looking nervous and confused. And at the center of it all stood Dante, dressed in another immaculate black blazer. His presence somehow even more commanding in daylight streaming through the windows. Emma, perfect timing. He smiled at her, and she noticed that when he smiled like that, genuine and warm, instead of the cold amusement she'd seen him wear with others, he looked younger, less dangerous, almost approachable, almost. "Everyone I'd like you to meet. Emma Clark, the new owner of Vincenzo's." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Emma felt the blood drain from her face, and the world tilted slightly on its axis. I'm sorry what Dante crossed the room to her, and she was suddenly very aware of how tall he was, how his presence seemed to fill all the space around her, how his cologne smelled like cedar and danger, and something else she couldn't identify. He held out a leather folder, and when she opened it with shaking hands, she saw property deeds, business licenses, tax documents, all with her name in the owner field. "I don't understand," she whispered, staring at papers that represented more money than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes. This is insane. "I can't accept this. I can't run a restaurant. I don't have any money to buy this from you." "I don't." "It's not for sale," Dante interrupted gently, his voice low enough that only she could hear, despite the room full of people. "It's a gift. You lost your job because you defended me, when no one else would. In my world, Emma loyalty is the most valuable currency. And you showed loyalty to someone you didn't even know at great personal cost. This is how I repay that. By making me a business owner." That's crazy. But even as she said it, she was looking around the restaurant with new eyes, seeing possibility instead of just her former workplace. "Why would you do this?" His dark eyes held hers, and she saw something vulnerable flash across his expression before being replaced by his usual controlled mask. "Because in 20 years of living in a world where everyone wants something from me, you're the first person who expected nothing and gave everything. Because you stood between me and humiliation without a second thought for your own safety. Because when I asked myself why you did it, the only answer that made sense was that you're genuinely good. And I've forgotten what that looks like." Emma felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by the enormity of what was happening, by the intensity in his voice, by the way he was looking at her, like she was something precious and rare. "I don't know anything about running a restaurant." "Then learn. I'll provide you with the best consultants money can buy. The best staff, whatever you need." He gestured to the assembled employees. "Most of them are good people who were just following orders. Marco stays if you want him. He did eventually defend you, even if it took him time to find his courage. You have complete control. Fire who you want, hire who you want, change everything or change nothing. This is yours, Emma. No strings attached." "There are always strings attached," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Especially with men like you." Something painful crossed his face, gone so quickly she almost missed it. "You're right to be cautious, but I'm not asking for anything except that you accept this gift in the spirit it's given. I'm not asking you to work for me, or owe me, or be involved in any part of my life beyond this moment. Take the restaurant, make it successful, live the life you deserve. Consider us even." Emma looked at the papers in her hands, at the staff watching her with a mixture of shock and hope at the restaurant that could be hers if she just had the courage to accept it. Then she looked at Dante, really looked at him, and saw past the expensive clothes and the dangerous reputation to something underneath. Loneliness, maybe, or a desperate need to do something good in a life that had been filled with darkness. "Even," she repeated softly, just like that. "You give me a multi-million-dollar property, and we're even, just like that." But the way he said it, the way his eyes lingered on her face, suggested that nothing about this was simple or clean or truly even unless you'd prefer to refuse, in which case I'll respect your decision and you'll never hear from me again. That should have been exactly what she wanted, to walk away, return to her safe if struggling life, avoid the dangerous complications that came with accepting anything from Dante Moretti. But as she stood there in the afternoon light, surrounded by opportunity and impossibility, Emma realized that something had shifted in her the moment she'd defended him last night. She'd already stepped off the safe path. The question now was whether she had the courage to keep walking. "I accept," she heard herself say, her voice stronger than she felt. "But I want to change some things. New menu, new management structure, profit sharing for the staff. If this is really mine, then I'm going to run it my way." Dante's smile widened into something genuine and warm, and for just a moment, Emma caught a glimpse of who he might have been if life had dealt him different cards. "I wouldn't expect anything less. Your courage is what impressed me in the first place." He extended his hand. "Partners then in this one thing at least." Emma took his hand. Feeling the warmth of his skin, the strength in his grip, the way something electric seemed to pass between them at the simple contact. "Partners," she agreed, and wondered if she'd just made the best or worst decision of her life. As Dante prepared to leave, his bodyguards materializing from wherever they'd been lurking, he paused at the door and looked back at her. "Emma, be careful. The people I removed from ownership won't be happy about this change. If anyone gives you trouble, call me." "I can handle myself," she said, lifting her chin with the same defiance she'd shown when defending him. "I know you can." His expression turned serious, almost worried. "But my world has a way of touching things I don't want it to touch. Just be careful." Then he was gone, leaving Emma standing in her restaurant. Her restaurant with a leather folder of ownership papers, and the growing realization that Dante Moretti had just changed her entire life with a gesture he probably considered minor. She didn't know yet that it wasn't the gift that would bind them together, but what would come after. She didn't know that accepting his generosity was like opening a door that could never be fully closed. She didn't know that somewhere across the city, people were already whispering about the waitress who'd caught the crime lord's attention and planning how to use that information to their advantage. All she knew was that when Dante had smiled at her, truly smiled, she'd felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Attraction. Curiosity, the beginning of something that felt terrifyingly like connection. And that scared her more than any reputation or any risk, because men like Dante Moretti didn't have simple relationships or easy affections. They had obsessions. And Emma was starting to suspect she'd just become his latest one. 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity that left Emma simultaneously exhilarated and exhausted. She threw herself into transforming Vincenzo's, arriving before dawn and leaving long after midnight. Learning everything from inventory management to staff psychology, to the delicate balance of creating an upscale dining experience that felt welcoming rather than pretentious. Marco proved invaluable, his years of experience compensating for her inexperience, and the staff responded to her genuine care for their well-being with loyalty that reminded her why she'd defended Dante in the first place. Everyone deserved to be treated with dignity. She hadn't seen Dante since the day he'd given her the restaurant. He'd been true to his word about no strings, sending consultants when she needed them, but never appearing himself, never asking for anything, never demanding her time or attention. It should have been a relief. Instead, Emma found herself looking up. Every time the door opened, found her thoughts drifting to dark eyes and dangerous smiles. At odd moments found herself wondering if he'd forgotten about her entirely. Then on a Tuesday evening, during the dinner rush, he walked in. Emma was in the kitchen reviewing the new dessert menu when Marco appeared in the doorway. His face pale despite the heat from the ovens. "He's here, Dante. He's asking for you." Her heart kicked into overdrive, and she hated that her first instinct was to check her reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator to smooth her hair and straighten her red apron. "Did he make a reservation? Does he need one, Emma? He owns the building." "I own the restaurant," she corrected firmly, squaring her shoulders. "And everyone makes reservations here, regardless of who they are." She found him at the same corner booth where they had first met, dressed in his signature black blazer with a charcoal shirt underneath, his dark eyes tracking her approach with an intensity that made her breath catch. He looked tired. She noticed shadows under his eyes that suggested too many late nights, a tension in his shoulders that spoke of stress he'd never admit to carrying. "Mr. Moretti, we require reservations, I'm afraid." She kept her voice professionally polite, aware of the entire restaurant watching this interaction. "Then I'll make one for two right now." The corner of his mouth lifted. Unless the owner wants to make an exception for an old friend. "We're not friends," Emma said. But she slid into the booth across from him anyway, her professional mask slipping. "Friends know each other. We've spoken maybe 3 times. Then let's fix that. Have dinner with me, Emma. Here in your restaurant, completely public and safe. Let me get to know the woman who's been occupying my thoughts for 3 weeks." Her pulse jumped at the confession, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I'm working. You're the owner delegate." He leaned forward slightly and she caught the scent of his cologne cedar and something darker, more complex. "Unless you're afraid of what you—" She lifted her chin in challenge. "I've researched you thoroughly, Dante. I know what you are, what you do, what you're capable of. If you wanted to hurt me, you wouldn't need dinner as a pretext." Something flickered in his eyes, approval mixed with what looked like pain. "You're right to know who I am. I've done terrible things, Emma. Things that would give you nightmares if I described them in detail. I've built my empire on fear and violence, and I won't pretend otherwise or ask you to ignore reality." He paused, his voice dropping lower. "But I've never lied to a woman I cared about, and I'm not going to start now. So yes, I'm dangerous. Yes, my world is dark. But with you in this moment, I just want to be a man having dinner with a woman he can't stop thinking about. Can you give me that? One evening where we're just Emma and Dante. No titles, no reputations, just us." Emma knew she should refuse. Every logical part of her brain screamed that getting involved with Dante Moretti in any capacity beyond business ownership was a catastrophically bad idea. But sitting across from him, seeing the vulnerability he was offering her, the way he was asking rather than demanding, despite having the power to take whatever he wanted, she felt her resistance crumbling. One dinner, she agreed quietly. "But in 2 hours when I'm actually off shift, and you're paying like any other customer." His smile was radiant, transforming his entire face into something that made her heart ache with its beauty. "I'll wait." True to his word, Dante sat in that booth for 2 hours, working on his phone occasionally, but mostly just watching her move through the restaurant, managing staff, and greeting customers, and doing all the things she'd learned to do in 3 frantic weeks. Emma was hyper-aware of his presence, of the way other diners kept glancing at him nervously, of how his bodyguards positioned themselves strategically around the room, of how he seemed to relax slightly every time she came into his line of sight. When her shift finally ended, she changed out of her apron, but kept her simple black dress and minimal jewelry, not wanting to seem like she was trying too hard. When she slid into the booth across from him, he'd somehow arranged for candlelight and wine, transforming the corner into something intimate despite the public setting. "Tell me about yourself," he said once they'd ordered. "The real you, not the owner or the waitress, but Emma Clark." So she did. She told him about growing up in foster care, about aging out of the system at 18, with nothing but determination and a high school diploma, about working 3 jobs to pay for community college classes she couldn't finish when money ran out, about the string of service industry positions that taught her how people treated those they considered beneath them, about her dreams of someday owning something of her own, where she could create a place that valued dignity over profit. She told him things she'd never shared with anyone, and he listened like every word mattered, like she was the most fascinating person he'd ever encountered. "And now you have it," he said, when she finished, his eyes warm in the candlelight. "Everything you wanted. Does it feel like you imagined? Terrifying and wonderful in equal measure." Emma smiled, allowing herself to relax slightly. "Now you tell me how Dante Moretti became this." She gestured vaguely at him at the restaurant, at the empire she knew existed beneath the surface. His expression shuddered slightly, walls coming up, before he consciously lowered them again. "That's a darker story, Emma. I'm not afraid of dark stories. I'm afraid of lies and pretense. So tell me the truth, Dante. Who are you when no one's watching?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying his wine glass as if it held answers to questions he'd never asked. "My father was a monster. He ran the family business with cruelty and paranoia, trusted no one, loved nothing except power. He wanted to make me into his image. Started training me when I was 8 years old to be ruthless, to see compassion as weakness, to understand that in our world, you either dominate or you die." His voice was carefully neutral, but Emma heard the pain underneath. "By the time I was 15, I'd seen things no child should see, done things no child should do. And when I was 25 and he was killed in a power struggle, he created through his own brutality. I inherited an empire built on fear and held together by violence." "You could have walked away," Emma said softly. "Could I?" He looked at her directly, and she saw the truth in his eyes. Hundreds of people depended on the Moretti family for their livelihood, their protection, their survival. Rival families were already moving to claim our territory, which would have meant bloodshed on a scale the city hadn't seen in decades. And I had a choice. Let it all collapse and condemn everyone connected to us, or step into the role and try to control the damage. I chose control. I became what I needed to become to keep people safe, even if that meant becoming someone I sometimes don't recognize in the mirror. Emma reached across the table before she could stop herself, placing her hand over his. "You chose to protect people. That doesn't make you a monster, Dante. That makes you someone who carried a burden you didn't ask for, because others needed you to." His hand turned under hers, his fingers interlacing with hers, and the simple contact sent electricity racing up her arm. "You see good in me that I'm not sure exists, Emma. Everyone else sees the crime lord, the man to be feared, the darkness incarnate. But you look at me like I'm just a man, like I could be redeemed. Maybe you don't need redemption. Maybe you just need someone who sees you clearly and doesn't run away." The words left her mouth before she could consider their weight, their implications, the way they invited exactly the kind of connection she'd told herself to avoid. Dante's grip on her hand tightened, his eyes searching her face with desperate intensity. "If you knew everything, all the details of what I've done, you would run. You should run. Being close to me is dangerous, Emma. People use the things I care about against me. If my enemies knew that he stopped himself, but the unfinished sentence hung between them heavy with meaning. That what Emma whispered, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. That you matter to me more than you should, more than is smart or safe, more than I've let anyone matter in over a decade. His voice was raw, stripped of the control he usually maintained. I came here tonight, telling myself I just wanted to check on my investment to make sure you were handling the restaurant well. But that's a lie. I came because I haven't been able to focus on anything except wondering if you think about me the way I think about you, if you feel this. He gestured between them at the tangible tension that crackled in the air. Or if I'm alone in this madness. Emma knew what the smart answer was. She should tell him she felt nothing should maintain professional distance, should protect herself from the inevitable complications that came with wanting a man whose life was built on darkness and danger. But sitting there with her hand in his, looking into eyes that held vulnerability, she suspected few people ever saw. She couldn't bring herself to lie. "You're not alone," she admitted quietly. "I think about you constantly. I dream about you. I catch myself wondering what you're doing, if you're safe, if you ever think about the waitress you gave a restaurant to on a whim. And it terrifies me, Dante, because I know better. I know what, you are, what being close to you means, and I'm still sitting here holding your hand like a fool." The smile that crossed his face was pure joy, unguarded and beautiful, and so at odds with his reputation that Emma felt her heart crack open a little wider. Then he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a brand, a claim, a promise. "You're not a fool. You're the bravest person I've ever met." His lips moved against her skin as he spoke, sending shivers through her entire body. "And I swear to you, Emma, I will do everything in my power to keep you safe from my world, from the consequences of knowing me, from all of it. You won't be touched by the darkness." "You can't promise that," she said, even as her thumb traced patterns on his wrist, feeling his pulse jump under her touch. "Watch me." They finished dinner in a haze of conversation that flowed as easily as the wine, touching on everything from philosophy to favorite books to silly childhood memories that had survived despite their respective traumas. Emma learned that Dante had a photographic memory, that he spoke 4 languages fluently, that he'd wanted to be an architect before life chose his path for him. He learned that she had a terrible singing voice, but sang anyway when alone, that she collected antique teacups for no reason she could explain, that she'd never been outside the state but dreamed of seeing Paris. "I could take you," he said suddenly, his eyes bright with possibility. "To Paris tomorrow if you wanted. Private jet, best hotels, anything you wanted to see. I can't just leave my restaurant." Emma laughed, but the offer touched something deep inside her. "Your restaurant will survive a week without you. Marco's competent. The staff is solid, and you've built something stable in just 3 weeks. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to that intimate register that made her entire body hyper-aware of him. "Let me show you the world, Emma. Let me give you something beautiful for once, instead of just material things. Dante." She wanted to say yes so badly, it physically hurt. "That's too much, too fast. We barely know each other." "Then let's fix that." His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing her lips in a touch that made her breath catch. "Spend time with me. Let me take you to dinner. Show you the city from my perspective. Let you see that my life isn't all darkness and violence, There's beauty too, Emma, and I want to share it with you. She should refuse. Emma knew she should pull back, maintain boundaries, protect herself from falling deeper into something that could only end badly. But his touch was gentle, despite the danger she knew those hands were capable of, and his eyes held something that looked desperately like hope, and she found herself nodding before rational thought could intervene. Okay, we can see where this goes, carefully and slowly. But Dante, I need you to understand something. She covered his hand with hers, holding his gaze steadily. I won't become part of your organization. I won't be involved in anything illegal, and I won't compromise my values even for you. If we do this, we do it with honesty and boundaries, or we don't do it at all. Agreed, he said immediately. I don't want you involved in that part of my life anyway. That stays completely separate. What we have, whatever this becomes, it exists apart from all of that. You have my word. Emma knew that a crime lord's word probably meant nothing in his usual world, but looking into his eyes, she believed him. Foolish, maybe dangerous, definitely. But she believed him. Their first kiss happened in the restaurant's parking lot, an hour later, under street lights that turned the night orange and gold, with his bodyguards politely looking away and giving them privacy that was probably an illusion, but felt real enough. Dante kissed her like she was precious and breakable, and desperately wanted all at once. His hands framing her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him. His lips moving against hers with restrained passion that promised so much more if she'd just let him in completely. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers and let out a shaky laugh. I'm in so much trouble with you, Emma Clark. Right back at you, Dante Moretti, she whispered, and kissed him again, because she could, because he was letting her. Because for this one moment in time, she was just a woman kissing a man she was falling for. And everything else could wait until tomorrow. But tomorrow came sooner than either of them expected. As Dante's car pulled away, and Emma walked to her own vehicle, she didn't notice the black sedan parked across the street, or the camera lens pointed at her through tinted windows, or the way someone made a phone call immediately after Dante's taillights disappeared around the corner. She didn't know that by kissing Dante Moretti in public, she'd just painted a target on her back that his enemies would be all too happy to aim for. She didn't know that his promise to keep her safe from his world was about to be tested in ways neither of them could prevent. She didn't know that the next chapter of their story would be written in the language of danger and choice and desperate protection, where love would have to prove itself stronger than the violence that defined his life. All Emma knew was that she was falling in love with a man whose darkness should terrify her, but somehow made her feel more alive than she'd ever been, and that she'd crossed a line tonight that couldn't be uncrossed. For better or worse, she was part of Dante Moretti's world now, and his part of hers, and the collision of those two realities was about to change everything. 2 perfect weeks passed. Dante took Emma to private art galleries, rooftop gardens overlooking the glittering city, his penthouse where they cooked together and talked until dawn. With him, she felt truly seen for the first time in her life. He remembered every small detail she mentioned, surprised her with thoughtful gestures, listened when she challenged him. The dangerous crime lord disappeared when they were alone, replaced by a man who laughed freely and confessed he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt genuinely happy. But reality shattered their bubble on a Thursday night. Emma was closing Vincenzo's when 2 men in expensive suits walked in, despite the closed sign. She recognized the type immediately. dangerous connections, calculating eyes, surveying the restaurant like predators. "We're not here to eat the taller one," said his smile, cold. "We're here to deliver a message to Dante Moretti's latest distraction. You're leverage now, sweetheart. Tell Dante the Castellano family doesn't forget. Victor says everything he took from us we'll take from him with interest." They left before Emma could respond, the cheerful door chime grotesque against the lingering threat. Her hands shook as she called Dante's emergency number. He answered instantly. "Emma, what's wrong?" She told him everything, her voice breaking. His response was immediate and commanding. "Lock the doors. My security team is 3 minutes away. I'm 10 minutes behind them. Don't leave until we arrive." When Dante burst through the door, he pulled her into his arms, and Emma finally let herself shake. "Tell me exactly what they said," he murmured against her hair. After she repeated every word, his jaw clenched. Victor Castigliano. 5 years ago, his father Lorenzo tried to start a war over territory. I stopped it by dismantling everything he'd built. Businesses, properties, influence. Lorenzo died 6 months later from the stress. Victor's blamed me, ever since waiting for the right leverage. His eyes met hers. "You're that leverage." "What are you going to do?" Emma asked, needing to understand this darker reality. "End this threat permanently. You're moving to my penthouse tonight, where security is absolute. I will protect you, Emma, no matter what it takes." She should have refused, insisted on independence, but seeing genuine fear beneath his determination, she understood this wasn't about control. It was about a man terrified of losing someone essential to him. "For how long?" "Until I deal with the Castellanos." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "They threatened what's mine. That never stands." That night, Emma moved into Dante's penthouse. When he offered her the guest room, she looked at this man preparing to go to war for her and said simply, "With you." They lay together in darkness, holding each other, while Dante shared stories of his childhood before everything went dark. Dreams he'd abandoned when reality demanded he become someone else. "Do you ever regret the choices you made?" Emma asked quietly. "Every day," he admitted. "But you make me want to be better, to leave this life behind and become someone worthy of you. You're already worthy. You just can't see it yet." The next morning, Dante left to handle business. Emma didn't ask for details when he returned, exhausted but unharmed that evening. She just pulled him into the shower, washed away the day, made him dinner, and held him. "It's handled," he said quietly. "The Castanos won't bother you again." That night they made love with desperate tenderness, seeking reassurance through touch. Afterward, in the darkness, Dante whispered, "I love you, Emma. You've become my entire world, and losing you terrifies me more than any threat ever has." Emma's heart swelled. "I love you too, and I'm choosing you. All of you dark and light together, even knowing what loving me means. Especially knowing that..." She kissed him softly. "I'm choosing us." His smile was radiant with joy. "Then I choose you too, Emma Clark. Partner equal the love of my life. You're mine, and I'm yours." They fell asleep, wrapped together. Two people from impossible worlds who'd found exactly what they needed in each other, unaware their love would soon demand even greater sacrifices. 3 months passed in a strange new normal that Emma both loved and struggled to adapt to. She split her time between managing Vincenzo's, which was thriving under her leadership, earning rave reviews, and becoming the most sought-after reservation in the city, and living in Dante's penthouse, surrounded by security measures that felt both protective and constraining. She'd grown accustomed to the bodyguards who shadowed her movements, learned to recognize the signs of Dante handling business. He wouldn't discuss with her, developed a careful ignorance about the parts of his life that existed in shadows. She couldn't see. Their relationship deepened in ways that surprised her. Dante was surprisingly domestic when given the chance, cooking breakfast for her on lazy Sunday mornings, reading beside her in comfortable silence, showing her aspects of the city she'd never known existed from the perspective of someone who owned pieces of it, both legally and otherwise. He was generous and attentive, remembering small details, and surprising her with thoughtful gestures that had nothing to do with expensive gifts and everything to do with genuine care. But the shadows were always there, lurking at the edges of their happiness. Phone calls he had to take in another room, meetings that ran late into the night, the way his expression would sometimes go cold and distant when handling business that reminded her exactly what he was capable of when pushed. Emma told herself she could live with not knowing that loving Dante meant accepting that parts of his world would always be close to her. But the willful ignorance sat uncomfortably, a compromise with her values that she examined less closely than she probably should have. Then everything changed on a Tuesday afternoon when Emma received a call from an FBI agent named Sarah Chen. "Ms. Clark, my name is Special Agent Chen, and I need to speak with you about Dante Moretti and your relationship with him. Would you be willing to meet with me?" Emma's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're talking about. If you have questions about my restaurant, this isn't about Vincenzo's. This is about the man you've been living with for 3 months, the documented, organized crime figure whose activities we've been investigating for 6 years." Agent Chen's voice was professional, but not unkind. "We know about the threats from the Castellano family, and we know how those threats were resolved. We have evidence that could put Dante Moretti away for multiple life sentences, but we need cooperation from people close to him to build our case. I'm offering you a chance to protect yourself legally and help us stop someone who's caused tremendous harm. Miss Clark, all I'm asking is that you hear me out." Every instinct screamed at Emma to hang up, to tell Dante immediately to remain loyal to the man she loved. But another part of her, the part that still believed in right and wrong, despite all the shades of grey she'd been living in, wondered what evidence they had. What Dante had really done to resolve the Castellano situation, whether love obligated her to protect someone, even if they'd crossed lines she couldn't uncross. "I'll meet with you," she heard herself say, "but I'm not promising anything." They met in a coffee shop, far from Dante's usual territory. Agent Chen arriving with a thick file that she opened with careful precision. "I'm going to be direct with you, Miss Clark. Dante Moretti runs the largest criminal organization in the city. Drug distribution, illegal gambling, money laundering, extortion. His empire touches nearly every illegal enterprise operating here. We estimate his organization generates over $50 million annually from activities that harm communities, destroy families, and perpetuate cycles of violence." Emma felt sick, but she kept her expression neutral. "That's not the man I know. The Dante I know is building legitimate businesses, supports charities, helps people. The Dante you know is also the same man who, according to our intelligence, ordered the complete economic destruction of the Castellano family 3 months ago in retaliation for threats made against you. Lorenzo Castellano Jr. Victor's brother lost his construction company, his home and custody of his children when Dante's people manufactured financial irregularities that led to federal charges. Victor Castellano himself is currently in hiding after his assets were frozen, and several of his associates disappeared under circumstances we're still investigating. The entire Castellano organization was dismantled within 6 weeks, Miss Clark, because they threatened you. He was protecting me. Emma's voice came out smaller than she intended. He was eliminating rivals using methods that included financial terrorism, and possibly worse. Ms. Clark, we believe several members of the Castellano organization are dead, their bodies likely never to be found. We can't prove it yet. Dante's too smart to leave evidence, but the pattern is clear to anyone looking. Agent Chen leaned forward, her eyes sympathetic but firm. I understand that you care about him, but caring about someone doesn't make their actions less harmful or give them a free pass to operate outside the law. You have a choice here. Continue enabling a criminal enterprise through your association, or help us stop it and protect yourself from becoming an accessory. I'm not part of his organization. I run a restaurant that he happened to give me. But even as Emma said it, she heard how naive it sounded. A restaurant purchased with money earned through illegal activities in a building where we have evidence of money laundering operations running through the commercial units below your establishment. Whether you know it or not, whether you intended it or not, you're connected to his empire now. Agent Chen slid several photographs across the table. Emma having dinner with known criminals at charity galas Dante had taken her to. Emma entering buildings that housed front companies. Emma whose presence provided legitimacy and cover for operations she'd never questioned. We don't think you're complicit. We think you're a good person who fell in love with someone dangerous and got pulled into something you didn't fully understand. We're offering you immunity and protection if you cooperate. Testimony about his activities, access to his home, and communications. Anything that might help us build our case. Emma stared at the photographs, at the evidence of a life she'd been living without fully comprehending its implications. And if I refuse, then when we eventually arrest Dante Moretti, and we will Ms. Clark, it's just a question of when. We'll have to investigate everyone in his orbit, including you. Your restaurant will be seized as proceeds of criminal enterprise. Your assets will be frozen during investigation. You could face charges as an accessory if we determine you had knowledge of illegal activities. I'm trying to help you avoid that outcome by giving you this choice. Now, while you still have options— Emma stood abruptly, her hands shaking. I need time to think. You have 48 hours. After that, we move forward with what we have, and the offer of immunity expires. Agent Chen handed her a card. I know this is difficult, but think about what the right thing to do is, Miss Clark. Not the loyal thing, not the easy thing, but the right thing. That's all I'm asking. Emma spent the rest of the day in a fog going through the motions at the restaurant, while her mind spun in circles. She loved Dante. That hadn't changed. But she couldn't ignore what Agent Chen had shown her. Couldn't pretend the implications didn't matter just because the man she loved was kind to her personally. If everything the FBI alleged was true, then Dante's empire was built on genuine harm, on activities that destroyed lives and communities, and her association with him made her complicit, whether she wanted to admit it or not. That night she confronted him. Tell me the truth, Emma said without preamble when Dante came home. Exhaustion in every line of his body. Everything the FBI says you do, the drug distribution, the money laundering, all of it. Is it true? Dante went very still, his expression shuttering into the cold mask he wore when conducting business. Who have you been talking to, Emma? An FBI agent contacted me today. showed me evidence, made allegations about your activities and how I'm connected to them now. I need to hear from you, Dante. I need the truth. All of it, not the sanitized version you've been feeding me." For a long moment he said nothing, just studied her with dark eyes that revealed nothing. Then his shoulders sagged slightly, and Emma saw resignation replaced the mask. Resignation and deep, bone-tired sadness. "Yes," he said simply. "It's true. Not all of it. I don't touch drugs. That's a line I won't cross because I've seen what they do to communities. But money laundering, illegal gambling protection operations, all of that is real." The Moretti family empire is built on controlling illegal markets and charging tribute from anyone operating in our territory. I didn't create this system, Emma, but I maintain it. I profit from it. And yes, people are harmed by it, either directly or indirectly. Emma felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Hearing him confirm it, hearing the matter-of-fact acceptance in his voice, made it devastatingly real in a way she'd been able to deny before. "How can you just admit that like it's nothing? It's not nothing." Dante's voice was quiet but firm. "It's the reality of the world I was born into, and the choices I made to survive in it. I told you from the beginning that I'd done terrible things, that my world was dark. You chose to look past that, because you wanted to see the good in me. And I let you because I was selfish enough to want someone to see me as more than what I do. But I never lied to you, Emma. I just didn't force you to look directly at truths you weren't ready to see. That's not fair." Tears burned her eyes, fury and heartbreak warring in her chest. "You let me fall in love with you while hiding the full extent of what you are. What you do. You made me complicit in activities I would never have supported if I'd known the full truth." "I know." He stepped toward her hands, raised in placation or surrender. "And I'm sorry, Emma. I'm sorrier than I have words for. But I also can't change who I am or what I've built. I can't walk away from my organization without creating a power vacuum that would tear this city apart. And I can't promise to be something different just because you want me to be. What did you do to the Castellanos?" The question came out harsh, demanding. "The FBI says people disappeared, that you destroyed their entire operation using methods that included possible murder. Did you kill them, Dante? Did you have them killed?" His jaw clenched, and Emma saw the truth in his eyes before he spoke. "I dealt with the threat they posed to you using every tool at my disposal. Some of those tools were financial and legal. Some weren't. I'm not going to apologize for protecting you, Emma, regardless of the methods required. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you." His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "There are things I will never tell you in detail, because knowing them would make you legally complicit and put you at greater risk. What I did to protect you, I did, knowing the consequences, and I'd do it again, without hesitation." Emma felt something crack in her chest. The beautiful illusion she'd been living in, shattering into pieces that cut on the way down. "The FBI offered me immunity if I cooperate with their investigation. Testimony. Access to your communications. Anything that might help them build a case against you." The silence that followed was deafening. Dante's expression went completely blank, and Emma saw him retreat behind walls she'd thought they'd torn down together, saw him transform from the man she loved into the crime lord everyone else feared. "And what did you tell them?" His voice was carefully neutral, giving away nothing. "I told them I needed time to think. Emma wrapped her arms around herself. Suddenly cold, despite the warmth of the penthouse, because I don't know what the right thing to do is anymore, Dante. I love you. That hasn't changed. But I also can't ignore what you do. Can't pretend it's acceptable just because you're good to me personally. People are hurt by your empire. Lives are destroyed by activities you profit from. How am I supposed to reconcile loving you with knowing that you're not? Dante said quietly, something breaking in his controlled facade. You're supposed to choose Emma. Between me and your principles, between love and what you believe is right, between the life we've built and the person you thought you were before you met me. That's what this moment is. A choice that will define who you become and what you're willing to accept for love. That's not fair. Tears were streaming down her face, now hot and angry and desperately sad. You can't make me choose between loving you and being a good person. I'm not making you do anything. The FBI is forcing this choice. The reality of my life is forcing it, and you have to decide what matters more. Abstract principle, or actual love for a deeply flawed man who would burn the world down to keep you safe. He moved closer, and Emma saw her own heartbreak reflected in his eyes. I love you. Emma, more than my empire, more than my legacy, more than my own life. If you cooperate with the FBI, if you help them build a case against me, I won't stop you. I won't threaten you or hurt you or try to protect myself at your expense, because you deserve to make this choice freely without fear of retaliation, and because my love for you means putting your needs above my own survival. Emma stared at him through her tears. This impossible man who ran a criminal empire with ruthless efficiency, but was offering to let her destroy him without resistance because he loved her that much. What if there was another way? What if you could walk away from this life, leave the organization behind? Build something legitimate with me? It doesn't work like that. Dante's smile was sad and infinitely weary. Men like me don't get redemption arcs where we leave the past behind and ride off into the sunset. There's no retirement plan for crime lords, Emma. If I try to walk away, my enemies will see weakness and attack. The people who depend on my organization for their livelihoods will be left vulnerable. The power vacuum would create chaos and violence on a scale this city hasn't seen in decades. I'm trapped by the choices I made long before I met you, and the only way out is prison or death, so I'm supposed to just accept it. Love you while knowing what you do, who you hurt. Or you cooperate with the FBI, help them put me away, and live with the guilt of betraying someone you love for the abstract concept of justice. His voice was gentle, despite the harsh words. There's no good choice here, Emma. Both options will hurt. Both will cost you something essential. You just have to decide which price you're willing to pay, and which version of yourself you can live with afterward. Emma looked at the man she loved, really looked at him, seeing both the darkness and the light, the violence and the tenderness. The monster and the man, all existing in the same complicated person. She thought about the FBI's evidence about the harm his empire caused, about her own values, and what she'd always believed about right and wrong. And she thought about love, about the way Dante had transformed her life, about the happiness she'd found in his arms despite everything. I need time, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't make this decision right now. Not with you standing here looking at me like that. I need space to think clearly. Then take it. Dante stepped back, giving her the physical distance she'd asked for, even though it clearly cost him. Go to the guest room. Leave the penthouse. Whatever you need. But Emma, know this. Regardless of what you decide, I love you. And that won't change. If you destroy me to save yourself or satisfy your conscience, I'll love you from prison. If you choose to stay and live with the moral compromise, I'll spend every day trying to be worth that sacrifice. There's no version of our future where I stop loving you. Emma fled to the guest room, collapsing on the bed and sobbing until she had nothing left. Her heart torn between impossible choices that would define the rest of her life regardless of which path she chose. Outside the door, Dante stood in the hallway for a long time before finally walking away, and neither of them slept that night, both wrestling with truths too heavy to carry alone, but impossible to share. The next 48 hours would determine everything. Whether love could survive honesty, whether redemption was possible for men who'd lived in darkness too long, whether Emma Clark had the strength to choose herself over someone she loved more than she'd ever loved anyone. The answer would change both their lives forever, and there was no going back once the choice was made. Emma spent the entire night and following day in agonizing contemplation, barely sleeping, hardly eating, replaying every moment with Dante against the backdrop of what she now knew about his empire. She made lists of reasons to cooperate with the FBI, lists of reasons to stay silent, and found that logic couldn't solve a problem that was ultimately about the heart versus the head. By the time the sun set on the second day, she'd reached a decision that felt both right and terrible, necessary and devastating. She called Agent Chen first. "I can't do it. I can't testify against him or provide evidence. You'll have to build your case without me." There was a long pause before the agent responded, disappointment clear in her voice. "You understand what this means for you legally for your future. I understand, and I'll accept the consequences, whatever they are. But I won't be the one to destroy him, even if he deserves it, according to the law." Emma's voice was steady, despite the tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for giving me the choice, Agent Chen. I hope you find another way to stop what he does without my help." After hanging up, Emma found Dante in his office, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city he controlled from the shadows. He turned when she entered, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes betraying desperate hope mixed with resigned acceptance of whatever judgment she'd reached. "I'm not cooperating with the FBI," she said without preamble. "I'm not helping them build a case against you." Relief flooded his features so completely that he actually sagged against the desk. "Emma." "But I can't stay with you either." The words came out firm, despite how much they hurt to say. "Not like this. Not while you're still running the organization, still profiting from activities that harm people. I love you, Dante, but I can't be complicit in your empire anymore. Can't pretend I don't know what you do just because I'm not directly involved." The relief vanished, replaced by devastation that he didn't even try to hide. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you want a future with me, you need to find a way out of this life. Really out. Not just delegating to others or stepping back while still maintaining control. You need to dismantle your organization, cooperate with authorities, make amends for the harm you've caused." Emma stepped closer, taking his hands even as tears blurred her vision. "I know you think it's impossible, that walking away means chaos and violence, but you're the smartest, most capable person I've ever met, Dante. If anyone can find a way to transition your empire into something legitimate while minimizing the damage, it's you. The question is whether you love me enough to try." Dante stared at her, like she'd asked him to move a mountain with his bare hands. "Emma, you don't understand the magnitude of what you're asking. dismantling an organization that's existed for 3 generations, that hundreds of people depend on. I understand perfectly. I'm asking you to choose between your empire and me, between the life you've known and the possibility of redemption, with someone who loves you enough to walk away if you can't change. She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. I'm not asking you to become someone else overnight. I'm asking you to try to take the first steps toward building something different, toward becoming the man you told me you wanted to be before your father's legacy trapped you. If you do that, if you genuinely work toward leaving this life behind, then I'll stay. I'll help you support. You first build a legitimate future together. But if you can't or won't, then I have to go, because staying would mean compromising values that are essential to who I am. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of an impossible decision. Emma watched Dante's internal struggle play across his face, the part of him that wanted to choose her wearing with the part that knew the cost of what she was asking, the magnitude of dismantling everything he'd built and believed in for over a decade. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough with emotion. If I do this, if I find a way to transition the organization and work toward legitimate operations, people will get hurt in the power struggle. Rival families will move on our territory. My own people might rebel against the change. Violence will happen that I won't be able to prevent, even with the best planning. I know. And that blood will be on both our hands if we do this together. Emma's voice was steady despite her tears. But if we don't try, if we maintain the status quo, then all the future harm your empire causes is also blood on our hands. There's no clean choice here, Dante. There's only the choice between trying to do better or accepting that we're too broken to save. Dante pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, his face buried in her hair as his body shook with silent emotion. When he finally spoke, his voice was muffled but determined. Okay, I'll do it. I'll find a way to transition out, to build something legitimate, to become someone worthy of what you're offering me. I don't know how yet, and I can't promise it won't take years. But I'll try, Emma. For you, for us, for the possibility of a future where I'm not the monster everyone believes I am. I'll try. The relief that flooded through Emma was so intense she almost collapsed her legs, giving out until Dante was the only thing holding her upright. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. Thank you for choosing us, for being brave enough to try for something different. Don't thank me yet. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes serious, despite the hope breaking through. This is going to be the hardest thing I've ever done, and there will be moments when I fail, when I make mistakes or backslide or can't find the right path forward. I need you to be patient with me, to remember that change, this fundamental, doesn't happen overnight. I'll be patient. But Dante, I also need to see real progress, real steps toward dismantling the illegal operations and building legitimate alternatives. I can't just take your word that you're trying. I need evidence that you're actually doing the work, even when it's difficult. Fair enough. He managed a small smile despite the gravity of what they were discussing. I'll give you complete transparency. Financial records, business plans, every decision I make about transitioning the organization. You'll see everything, know everything. And if at any point you think I'm not genuinely trying, or I've crossed lines that can't be uncrossed, you can walk away. No arguments, no attempts to stop you. Emma nodded, sealing the agreement with a kiss that tasted like tears and hope and desperate love. Then we do this together, one step at a time, building something new from the ashes of what was. The next months were the most challenging of both their lives. Dante began the painstaking process of transitioning illegal operations into legitimate businesses, working with lawyers and accountants to create legal frameworks for enterprises that had existed in shadows for decades. Some of his people accepted the changes and transitioned with him. Others rebelled, seeing his moves toward legitimacy as weakness or betrayal, forcing confrontations that sometimes turned violent, despite his best efforts to minimize harm. Emma stood by him through it all, providing emotional support and moral guidance, while maintaining enough separation to keep her own hands clean legally. She expanded Vincenzo's into a small chain of restaurants that provided employment for people leaving Dante's organization, creating legitimate opportunities for those willing to change their lives. She testified voluntarily before a grand jury about the minimal knowledge she'd had of his illegal activities, accepting immunity in exchange for complete honesty, and somehow managed to maintain her integrity while protecting the man she loved from prosecution for crimes he was actively working to leave behind. There were setbacks and moments of crisis. A rival family made a move on Moretti territory during the transition, resulting in a confrontation that ended with property damage and injuries that reminded Emma exactly what world Dante came from. Some of his longtime associates couldn't or wouldn't change, forcing him to cut ties with people who'd been loyal to his family for generations. The FBI continued their investigation, and while Agent Chen was sympathetic to Dante's transition efforts, she made clear that past crimes wouldn't be forgiven just because he was trying to reform. Through it all, Emma and Dante's relationship deepened in ways that wouldn't have been possible without the crucible they were going through. They learned to communicate about difficult things, to navigate disagreements without letting them destroy what they'd built, to support each other through challenges that would have broken lesser partnerships. Dante showed her the vulnerable parts of himself he'd hidden from everyone else. His fears, his doubts, his genuine desire to be better, despite not always knowing how. Emma showed him that love didn't require perfection, just honest effort and willingness to grow. A year after Emma had given Dante the ultimatum that changed both their lives, they stood together in the newly renovated Vincenzo's, now the flagship of a legitimate restaurant empire, and celebrated the official dissolution of the Moretti crime family's illegal operations. It wasn't a complete victory. There were still legal investigations ongoing, still consequences to face for past actions, still work to be done to fully transition into legitimate business. But it was a beginning, a concrete step toward the future they'd been building together. "I never thought I'd see this day," Dante admitted quietly, as they stood alone in the restaurant after the celebration had ended, his arms around Emma as they swayed to music only they could hear. "Never thought I could leave that life behind, or that anyone would love me enough to make it worth trying." "I always knew you could," Emma said, tilting her head up to kiss him softly. "I saw the man you could be, even when you couldn't see it yourself. I just had to give you a reason to believe it too. Marry me." The words came out sudden and unplanned, but Dante's eyes were completely serious as he pulled back to look at her. "I know I should do this properly with a ring and romance and everything you deserve. But Emma, I need you to know that I'm Alain. No reservations, no holding back, no part of my life that I won't share with you. Marry me. Build this new life with me. Let me spend every day proving that choosing me was the right decision." Emma's heart swelled so large she thought she might burst with the happiness flooding through her. Yes, of course. I'll marry you today, tomorrow, whenever you want, however you want. Yes. Their kiss was deep and claiming a promise and a celebration all at once. The sealing of a bond that had been forged through fire and choice and love that refused to accept defeat. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, Dante pulled a small velvet box from his pocket with a sheepish expression. I lied about not having a ring. I've been carrying this for 3 months, waiting for the right moment. Turns out the right moment is whenever I'm with you, and can't imagine another day without making this official. The ring was perfect, simple, and elegant. A single diamond that caught the light and threw rainbows across Emma's hand as he slid it onto her finger. She stared at it through happy tears at this symbol of commitment from a man who'd literally transformed his entire life for her, and felt certain that despite all the challenges that lay ahead, they were going to make it. I love you. She whispered the words insufficient for the magnitude of what she felt, but the best she could offer. I love you so much, Dante Moretti. And I'm so proud of who you've become, who you're still becoming. I love you too, Emma Moretti to be. He grinned at the name, trying it out. And I promise to spend the rest of our lives being worthy of the faith you showed in me. The choice you made to stay when you could have run. They married 3 months later in a small ceremony at Vincenzo's, surrounded by the staff who'd become their family and the few people from Dante's old life who'd successfully transitioned into legitimate business. It wasn't the huge society wedding that Dante's wealth could have afforded, but it was authentic and meaningful. A celebration of love that had survived impossible odds and come out stronger on the other side. 5 years later, Emma stood in that same restaurant, now the heart of a restaurant empire spanning 3 states, and watched her husband work the room at a charity gala supporting programs for at-risk youth. Dante had become everything she'd seen in him that first night, when he'd been just a dangerous man in a corner booth, and she'd been a waitress with more courage than sense. He ran legitimate businesses, now employed hundreds of people in jobs that didn't require compromising their values, and used his wealth and influence to actually help communities rather than exploit them. There were still shadows in their past, still legal consequences being navigated, still people who remembered who Dante Moretti had been and couldn't see who he'd become. But Emma had learned that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing differently, every day going forward, about using former darkness to appreciate present light, about becoming someone new, while acknowledging who you used to be. As Dante caught her eye across the crowded room, and smiled that smile that still made her heart race after all these years, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a simple act of defending a stranger, had grown through impossible choices and painful transformations, and had resulted in a love that had literally changed both their lives in ways neither could have predicted. She was no longer just Emma Clark, the waitress who'd defended a crime lord and somehow captured his heart. She was Emma Moretti, co-owner of a legitimate empire, wife to a reformed man still working daily toward redemption, partner to someone who'd proven that love really could transform even the darkest soul if given the chance and the courage to try. And as Dante made his way through the crowd toward her, his eyes holding all the love and gratitude and promise of their shared future, Emma knew with absolute certainty that every difficult choice, every painful sacrifice, every moment of doubt had been worth it for this, for a love that refused to accept defeat, for a partnership built on honesty and transformation, for a future that belonged to them both, built together from the ashes of who they used to be into something neither could have created alone. The crime lord had found redemption in the arms of a brave woman who'd seen past his reputation to the man underneath. The waitress had found her empire not in property or wealth, but in the heart of someone willing to change his entire world for her. And together they'd proven that love, real, honest, transformative love, could conquer even the darkest past if two people were willing to fight for it with everything they had. Their story had started with an impossible encounter and an act of unexpected courage. It had continued through danger and choice and painful transformation. And it would go on not perfectly, not without challenges, but authentically, and together, which was all either of them had ever really wanted. The end.